Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest, the wonderful Rob Delaney! Pleasure to see you again.
It's great to see you, and I'm glad that you brought the chairs from your TV show, because I told you before, I used to deliver the newspaper as a boy, so I used to wake up every morning as a kid and have something like this on my front steps that had been dropped off by a big truck, and then I would go deliver it. So this is sort of a Proust's Madeleine type thing for me.
So lovely, but even seeing you smiling and rubbing there, you look like the happiest vagrant I'd ever seen. And even being touched by you then, you strike me as a man who gives good hugs.
Oh, thanks. Well, I'm American, so so we hug, and I'm big and I'm hairy. I have a new cologne, so it's...
What, like your own brand that you've brought out?
Yeah, I make it.
Yeah.
I make it out of my own essence. I extrude it, and now it's on.
Yeah. I love that Man by Rob Delaney, and just women everywhere, just instantly pregnant. We should talk about the book, which I don't know if anyone's read it. It's an extraordinary book. It's called A Heart That Works, and it's about your son Henry that passed away. And I always feel like we have a sort. I don't know if this is weird to say this, but I feel like we have a connection, because I think it was the first time you'd spoken about Henry on TV was on my show.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
And I felt it's one of the interviews I'm most proudest of, but also most terrified about doing. I remember doing it, I remember there was a word I said to you when I said, I just don't know what I'm meant to say.
Right.
And it feels like this book and the way that you talk about the loss of your son really helps people figure out what to say and ultimately just say something.
Yeah, so it's interesting, and thank you, because that interview was great, and it was, when it went on YouTube, so many bereaved parents and siblings shared it with each other, and I don't say anything new or original. I just listen to other bereaved parents and people who've been through terrible tragedies, synthesize it and barf it back out. So I'm no better or no worse than any other bereaved parent, but being in the public eye, I do try to just talk about it honestly. And so that interview, I know our discussion was helpful to a lot of people, so I was very grateful for that. Yeah, and then in terms of saying stuff, the book, although I did make it out of words, I was...
You might imagine that it was just noises with Rob Delaney.
But I did my best to show rather than tell, because in times of incredible grief, words really don't do a lot, but actions do. So in the book, I tried to illustrate how the people who came over and just said, hey, put down, close the laptop that you're arguing with, the council about social care hours with, take off your shoes, lie down, take a nap, I'm gonna take your kids to the park. The people who did stuff like that, or the people who rang the doorbell and ran away after leaving, some spaghetti bolognese there. That's the type of stuff that helps so massively. Because a lot of people are get nervous and they want to be well, let's make it unhappen. Why don't we, for all intents and purposes, how about it didn't happen? And they'll try to shove it in a drawer, which makes me want to kill them and festoon and maybe decorate a Christmas tree with their entrails. But if they're
and that's the tension I felt.
But if they acknowledge that it happened, then I feel sane, cared about, and then the storm of emotions that comes up in me quite frequently can kind of be metabolized or dissipate or whatever. And so it's just really nice to have people, even for a second, because that's how long it takes. A second, maximum literally 4 seconds on the outside. And that's the nicest thing you can do for somebody.
Was it painful to write?
Sometimes, if I put in a proper, 40-hour work week, which I did sometimes, because I didn't want to really stew in it. I didn't want to spend a long time writing the book. I wanted to get it out in an honest manner and in a clear manner. I felt that was sort of my only responsibility. And so I did work pretty quickly on this book, or I guess efficiently, I don't know. I mean, I showed up and wrote every day. And if I did too much in a week, it was fairly exhausting. So I knew to pace myself, or learned to pace myself a bit. When I did that, I actually benefited, I felt, from the writing process because it helped me understand some things, see things more clearly, place them in context. It gave me a much deeper appreciation for how amazing my wife and my other sons were throughout the process, because it just set down in black ink on white paper how wonderful they are. So that felt good to, be ostensibly working and then just sort of unspooling their majesty and how wonderful they are. So it made me fall deeper in love with the people that live in my house. I loved them before, but now I was like, oh, now it's a whole new level. So that was really cool.
It's such a multifaceted book because it's heartbreaking, then it's funny, then there's revelations. One of my favorite bits in the book is when you speak about the importance. You're so glowing about all the people that cared for Henry, and you mention their names, and there's no bullshit here. You're not saying, oh, the people. It's specific names of men and women that looked, and then they came to Henry's memorial. Yeah. It's beautiful. And then you speak about one day when they bring in care dogs to like a little care dog that goes to the hospital, and there's this beautiful paragraph where you hilariously point out your problems with small dogs. That is just hilarious about how you don't trust them, you don't like these yappy things that ultimately humans have made. What's the cutest thing I can create to put in my handbag and march about? You hate these dogs. Yeah. We're with you. And then seconds later, the dog comes in and plays with Henry, and you realise the importance of that person. And we live in a world where we go, well, what does that matter? Well, why should we have dogs in hospitals? But the way you speak about that is so beautiful because it was the most perfect thing for your son at that moment.
Oh, it was such a joy. He was so happy, and he was hooked up to all kinds of shit. He had a big brain tumor next to his brain stem, and when they took it out, they were amazing surgeons, but they really had no choice. They did have to damage his brainstem and cranial nerves around it. So he was disabled by the removal of the tumor, and that led to him having a tracheostomy, which meant he couldn't speak. And it also, because you meddle around in the brainstem, it meant he couldn't walk. And so when the little dog came in, I unhooked him from a bunch of stuff safely. I knew what it all was. And I put him on the floor, and he was so ecstatic. And even though he couldn't walk, he could shuffle around on his bum very fast. And so he just shuffles up to this beautiful little dog and is so happy. And the reason, and I tried to communicate it in the book, that what is happening is so wonderful, is that also nerve damage led to him having Bell's palsy. So half of his face was totally paralyzed. The other half was not. So you could see the half that wasn't paralyzed went into like a smile that like threatened like the musculature of his face. It was like, because you could compare it, so you could like chart, like exactly calibrate how happy he was, and it was insane. And so he was so beautiful and so happy, and he had, he had lost his hair from chemo, and so he was just the sweetest little, beautiful, little kind of alien-looking little creature, and I was so in love with him, and he was just so happy to have this gross little dog come in, And so it was a very special day. So yeah, for the rest of my life, yeah, that'll be one of the last things I think about when a sniper's bullet explodes my skull in, 11 years. I don't know why I said that.
That was the end of that story. Nobody anticipated.
Yeah, whatever.
So when you describe that, we feel like we're feeling it, and we feel your excitement of being able to be back in the moment. And is there then this sort of shuddering moment when you realise those moments? Because do you know what I mean? I feel your excitement, and then I also feel your sadness that it won't happen again.
Right.
What's that like?
What is that like?
Unfucking bearable.
So Henry is one of 4 sons that I have.
Yeah.
And 3 of them are alive, and they're right down the street. And one of them died, and he was cremated. What happened to his soul and his real essence, I don't know. I don't know what happened to it. But I know that he remains my son, and he, wherever he is, whatever he is, still receives at least, since there's 4 of them, 25% of my parenting, energy, love, attention. So where did he go? Where is he? I don't know. So American people will, when they review the book on like Goodreads or whatever, there are some American Christians who don't like my profanity in the book, all right? And then also are concerned that I don't end it with like a message of faith. And I guess I just mentioned that because I do have a spirituality. I do have some kind of faith, but I guess I'm not like, I don't have like the hubris to try to define it.
Yeah.
Also, whatever comes next, I don't want my shitty little mind and ego to be able to understand it now on Earth. It better be better than that, or their God sucks. So I just mean to say, I feel like whatever God you believe in, you could look at our story where, yeah, there's a lot of anger, but if your God is worth anything, they ought to be able to handle one guy's understandable anger. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And also, if your son dies,
yeah,
surely you've earned the right to be profane.
Yeah.
Like,
I feel that way.
I
don't worry. I feel it's like it's their problem.
Yeah.
I mean, because plus as a comedian, like, you don't want to swear all the time, but it's like black pepper. You're not going to cook. You know what I mean? You're going to cook without that? Like, good luck.
What an excellent metaphor that
yeah,
is.
it's not the only ingredient, but you're going to want to have it in your arsenal.
Well, every comic's written a joke and then go, yeah.
Yeah, I better just...
Then now you're going to watch comedians and go, that guy's put a lot of pepper in it.
Wow.
Or that guy needs some flavouring. But that's what makes, because presumably that's, and you speak very honestly about, your relationship with your wife, and, having moments, having sex in moments when people might not expect couples to have sex. But presumably that is a true representation of what people do.
So it's interesting. I wrote that, and that's true. So his surgery to remove his tumor was in the neighborhood of 13, 14 hours. And so they said, what you should do is get a hotel room close to the hospital, because you'll be scared, you'll be exhausted, you'll be crying, and that's probably, in our experience, we find that's kind of the best place. And so we were like, okay, so we did it. So we were in the hotel, and we were scared, we were crying, we were watching Friends, The Big Bang Theory, and we had sex. And we had sex 2 times. And just because we were hugging and we were close, and also we're married, so that's one of the things that you can do. And sometimes in weird moments that you want to connect like that. And so I wrote that in like a first draft, and I showed it to my wife. I was like, obviously I'll take that out, but I just wanted to make sure I was being ultra honest, and then we can take stuff out. And she's like, I don't think you should take that out. And she was like, people, I think all the people I know who've lost kids, all the people I know who've had kids in the hospital, and now for us that's a very large number. She's like, they would want to know that, they would appreciate that. So I kept it in, and it's true. And so a lot of people who've had sick kids or kids who died were like, hey, thanks for putting that in. That made us feel like not monsters, you know. It made us feel like not sex monsters, which is, you know, something I try to do.
Yeah, but I think,
and also, you know, like you, somebody who assembles things for consumption, you know, tours, television shows, documentaries and stuff, you do think about the story that you're telling, the arc that you're telling. Even if it's a true story, we're choosing how it's told, right? And so I thought, knowing what I know about delivering stories to people, I was like, I smell that the world could use a book where somebody doesn't talk about their grief and then say, but you know what? Everything happens for a reason. Or, but you know what? One day the sun did come out and I started to notice the bird songs again and stuff like that. And all that. And because there's a temptation to do that. We want to take care of people. We want. And I thought, you know what? I don't think that is the best use of the mouthpiece that I have at this moment. I figured, and the response that the book has been receiving seems to bear it out, that it was a good idea to show the horror and the anger and the fear in an unvarnished manner. But then at the same time, when terrible things are happening, that doesn't mean funny things stop happening.
Exactly.
You know, there might be greater stretches where they're not happening, but, you know, rarely is any one day one wall-to-wall emotion. You know, there's lulls and peaks and valleys, so that's what I attempted to do.
And it's the role that horror films now play in your and your wife's life is extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah.
The way you consume them is very different to how most people consume horror.
Yeah, so they, and I mean, a particular example is the beyond violent Midsummer by Ari Aster.
Yeah.
We saw that when Henry was in the, at what point did we see it? Because we saw both his films. I think it was after he died was when Midsummer came out. And we were in the hospital, the movie theater, holding hands and laughing because it's horrific what happens in there. But that to us, it's almost like exposure therapy or whatever. Like, yeah, sure, it's horrible. It's not as horrible as what happened to us. So it's almost like an hors d'oeuvre for us or something. Or like a little hair of the dog. So other people are like, oh God, like I have to bleach my eyes. Whereas we're like, hey sweetheart, you know, put her hair behind her ear. Isn't this, what a night, we're having such fun.
But presumably people that don't know your story are just seeing two people in a cinema kissing in a horror film
they're clearly planning a killing. Yeah. And no, we're not. We're just unwinding.
Yeah. Yeah, the whole book is just, it's a love letter to your family, I think. And the way you describe stroking your son's hair or kissing your son's head, it's really special. And
one thing I used to do after he lost his hair from chemo and the fuzzy hair grew back, I would put my eye socket on like any round part of his head, usually like this part, and I would just press my eye socket onto his soft, fuzzy chemo head and feel the heat of his head just like radiate into my sensitive eye socket, and it made me so happy. It was such a wonderful, you think, I imagine your kid having chemo and losing your hair, you think that's terrible. It absolutely is, but there's also a beauty to it, you know, and just feeling the heat of him come into my eyeball, you know, just such a joy. So yeah.
But I think that's so people who haven't experienced the loss that you have, it also shockingly reminds you of how lucky you are to have people that you love that are alive. Yeah. And I genuinely believe you could read it and think better about repairing relationships you have with your family or friends, because I really do. Like, it's sort of, it's such a special book that you've written.
Well, yeah, because like I know, unfortunately, that my other children are gonna die. I fucking pray they're at my funeral, being like, rather than rather than me being at theirs. But I do know that everybody that I love, something in their body will fail, and it'll lead to a domino effect, and their bodies will stop working. And I know it'll happen to me. And that's no longer theory. You know what I mean? For a lot of people, that's like, well, I believe it on paper, but you don't know it in your bones. And so now I know that, and my family knows that. And so we've done our best to change the way that we operate, to make the most out of the time that we do have.
What do you mean by change the way you operate? So is that putting less, because you talk about your relationship with your career.
Yeah, so I say no. Like, I know, like, my agents and manager, I can hear them over the phone being like, oh, Christ. When I say no to, like, a really good opportunity, I'm like, yeah, but it shoots in Philadelphia. Remind me, are my kids in Philadelphia? Is that where they are? And they're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, so I can't do the job in Philadelphia. They're like, but it's with Academy Award. And I'm like, I know, I would love to. I know, God, Jesus, yeah. No, I can't do it. And it makes me, I still have to, like, no, and when I get older, when my kids are older, then I'd like to work more, because I love to work, but not as much as I love to squeeze them and lie on top of them where they scream for me to get off, and like every time they fart, I like cheer.
Can you imagine? I'm just thinking there. What they should do that with, like, whatever that film was in Philadelphia. They should show the film, and they should show the 10 minutes of what you did when the film was made. But it's literally your kids farting and you go, like that. And here's what the actor who didn't take the role did.
Yeah. God. So that's weird, No,
but the point is, it's sort of, it's so interesting and kind of inspiring to see somebody draw a line in the sand and say this is more important than that. That status or that experience can't topple that.
Another way I'm lucky is that people found out who I was when I was a little bit older in life. So as soon as I was able to pay my rent with comedy money and then have like 11 pounds left over, I was like, oh, well, basically I'm a billionaire. So I already have everything that I need.
Yeah.
I have a fucking piano. That's what I wanted. When I was like, if I had funny money, what would I do? And I was like, I would get a piano and I would get an elliptical machine. I only have the piano. And that's proven to be, now I like to exercise less, so I don't even want that anymore. So now I don't even need anything, so I can't, as long as I can just pay the rent.
Well, why don't you sort of make your dreams come true and get a sort of like a pulley system so you can kind of play the piano.
That's a great idea.
And and that would sell.
To look into, yeah.
The Peloton piano.
Yeah.
What a weird way of ending a really special interview. With the worst Dragon's Den idea ever. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for the wonderful Rob Delaney.
Thank you.
Absolutely great.
All right.